afternoon, everybody. I'm feeling a touch out of place, I've got to admit. I thought just before I start, I'll tell a very brief anecdote. I've worked in the cattle industry a bit over a decade now, most of my professional life, mainly in the north, but there was a time when I was in Canberra and I was a very young, fresh graduate from university, and I got a job in Canberra working for Cattle Council, and my boss said to me, "Will, we're the peak industry body for the cattle industry, never forget that. Make sure you're always presentable, you need to always wear a suit, no matter where you're going in the country, it sets you apart and it says that you work for the Cattle Council of Australia." Yeah, didn't see the trap coming as it turned out. That was a good piece of advice from my boss. And I rocked up to, I flew down to Melbourne, and I had a really short turnaround in Melbourne. I had to get to the hire car place, get the hire car, I had to get out to Horsham. And I was really agitated. It was the ski season. There was all these people trying to get hire cars. They needed chains. It was taking ages. And I cut through the line. I said, "Mate, I desperately need a car like right now. I'm going to miss this meeting that I'm going to." And he went, "Oh, look, okay, here, take this one." And I grabbed the keys and I went outside, and it's a convertible Mercedes-Benz. So I rocked up to a producer day in Horsham where we were touring paddocks in a suit, which was the wrong outfit to be wearing for that occasion, in a convertible Mercedes-Benz. I got back to Canberra and my boss said to me, "You didn't really wear a suit down there, did you?" I said, "Yeah, you said everywhere." He said, "I meant in Canberra. Don't ever wear a suit in Horsham." Anyway, so I'm feeling very out of place today. I've got a suit on. I had to get this dry cleaned when I started in the role. If you wear a suit in the Northern Territory, people look at you funny, or you die from a heat stroke. So I for all of you today, I've made an effort and I'll put a suit on. So I thought I'd just mention that. Thank you. The funny part about the convertible was I rocked up and I was immediately classified as a I do swear a little bit, sorry. And that night, after a couple of bottles of wine, every single producer in the place came up to me and went, "Got those keys?" And I went, "No, I do not. I do not have those keys. You are not speeding around in my convertible." So this is actually, in my time working in agriculture, this is my first presentation in New South Wales. So I want to say an enormous thank you for being invited. I'd like to express a personal thanks to the committee for extending me an invitation. And most importantly, I've spent my career working in agricultural organisations that rely very, very heavily on volunteers, and I know the amount of work that goes into events like this. So I would like to ask, ladies and gentlemen, could we have a round of applause for the committee who's organised today and organises these events every month? Now, I realise offering a speaking topic on agricultural levies to attendees of a paid lunch is not something that's likely to have set the ticket sales on fire. I feel privileged that so many of you have been able to get to be here given the topic, and I feel great pity for those who may not have bought their own tickets. They're only now just realising that I'm going to be discussing the cattle transaction levy. I can confirm it's too late. The doors are locked. You're stuck in here, and you are stuck here for the duration. But there is some hope. For those who've not had the luck or lack thereof of hearing me speak before, I do try to make things interesting. I've previously quoted a German philosopher in Latin in front of a bemused NT Cattleman's audience, exquisitely tortured the words of St. Augustine to fit a somewhat ambling narrative about truth and policy setting at the same event a year later, and most recently given a keynote address at a dinner in front of Australia's leading agricultural educators with half an hour's notice after playing 36 holes of golf. There was a secret to how I got through that last one, but I'm not going to talk about it now, but please ask me about it later. It's a good story. For today, I thought it best not to attempt an uneducated translation of one language into another, nor to exhaust the words of far smarter people than myself in a prolonged and somewhat meaningless analogy. But I did think I should offer something of a theme. As mentioned, I will be discussing the cattle transaction levy and Cattle Australia's approach to what will be happening in the coming months. But in truth, this process has only just begun. While there will be much to be said and metres of column spaces to be filled, we stand at the beginning of a journey we have not yet departed on. So I thought I would also use this opportunity to reflect on our industry, on our past, and share a vision for how we can approach this process together with hope and optimism. Levy reviews have often been contentious issues, causes of anger, debate, and frustration. After all, we're talking about taking money out of people's pockets, whether they like it or not. And for many, this can be a difficult discussion. But it is my hope that as Cattle Australia, we can approach this in a manner where it doesn't have to be. When starting out on a long and winding road, it always helps to seek out guidance and wise words. For today, I thought I would start with a quote from a former agriculture minister. John Kieran, who was the Federal Agriculture Minister between 1981 and 1993, during what must be said was one of the most tumultuous times in Australia's agricultural industry, reflected in his memoir on the nature of agricultural industry representation and some of the tendencies he saw in his time as minister. He wrote, "In general, it is characteristic of the sociology of conservative farm organisations that they are unable to anticipate the future in any cohesive way. It is the politics of industry organisations that inhibit a whole of industry ability to look forward. Organisations are less flexible than individuals as they become fixated on current problems and the fight to be heard by government, and thereby become passive regarding the challenges ahead. To anticipate the future, an industry needs to look outside the industry and act as a whole. Due to their structure, farm organisations tend to look at symptoms, not causes. And when the causes arise externally, organisations become reactive. There are few incentives for primary producer organisations to anticipate, act quickly, and embrace the challenges of change because of the way they are constituted. This is why ongoing, rigorous thought through policy alternatives, leadership, and the development of philosophy are so important." Now, regardless of my or your personal feelings about these comments, they are something I've often considered over the years in the context of decision-making at organisations that I've worked for. And if we're all being honest, there is at least some truth to these words. We do so often find ourselves looking inward instead of out, towards immediate symptoms of ongoing and seemingly endless problems, fixing washout and dirt roads when bitumen is needed, selling our cows today to pay the bank tomorrow, knowing what it means for the days coming after. But where Minister Kieran and I disagree is that he sees this as a weakness, when for me, I have seen it, at times, be the basis for our biggest strengths. Our somewhat frustrating embrace of the past can from the outside appear to be inflexibility and resistance to change. But perseverance and resilience are so often built around the pillar of certainty that comes only from knowing you can get through tough times because you have before. Jumping down the hole next to your mate the digger only because you know the way out. While we must be conscious of our tendencies and the potential for them to become negative, having this awareness may just be enough. You see, cautionary words, when heeded, do not serve as a predeterminant of an outcome, but a preemption of it. They can help prevent a known failure or an unknown risk, can serve to repudiate the mistakes of those remembered, as well as those long lost. I've always sought to learn the lessons of the past, but I do actively resist them shaping my future. Instead, I let them inform it with wisdom and offer hope in a place of trepidation, craft aspiration instead of aversion. The old echoes guiding our hand, but not demanding, not directing it. For an industry such as ours, I've always believed conservative thought, if not the politics of it, is wise. Looking to the past as a way of managing an unknowable future, in an industry more reliant on the incomprehensible days and months ahead than any other, is as prudent as giving it no consideration at all, in the inane embrace of a new is a folly of the highest order. As we embark on what is today a new epoch in our history, a time where decisions made collectively by global governments are at the very centre of our prosperity, at a rate not seen for more than a century and most likely never during a period of peace, ensuring our industry structures are best able to serve our core purposes and deliver for our collective hopes for the future could not be more significant. We must learn from the past, but not let it disable us. In March this year, Cattle Australia called for a review of the cattle transaction levy. Since that time, we have engaged with other industry organisations, the federal government, the Department of Agriculture, as well as our industry service providers to begin this process. In the spirit of agricultural sector and agricultural policy, there have been a lot of hurdles to get over. Doubtless there will be more to come. But our reasoning behind calling for this on one level was simple. It is needed. When we as an industry last reviewed the levy more than 17 years ago, it was written that the levy should be reviewed every 3 years from here on in. For any number of reasons, this has not happened. On another level, and at the dawn of a new organisation that is Cattle Australia, we felt it integral to our role and function to ensure that this fundamental aspect of our business should be considered more closely. There is not one of us in this room who would not look closely into their own business model if it was 1, 2, or 5 years old, let alone 17. It is simply neglectful to let this continue. And there was a simpler path for us, to not seek to undertake this task, to let the problems linger. I'm not sure many within the industry would have minded if we did, and I do know that there are many concerned that we did not. But there is also a deeper truth here, that we as an industry have left this conversation go for too long. This is as much about our collective needs as it is about a responsibility and duty we owe each other, a duty we owe ourselves. It is time once again for us to come together and talk, to contest ideas, challenge our expectations, and find an agreement from which we can all rise together, to look back on what we have achieved and define a pathway for the future. I have long believed that it is in the contest of ideas and through the brutality of our common honesty that we find the best of ourselves, the best of each other. And of course, the old fears of the past will emerge once again, of the North versus the South, of the West being forgotten, of Tasmania again being left off the map, of the corporates dictating to the families, of the small being trodden over by the big, of the money being wasted, the business class flights for executives, the compulsory unionism, all the old adages of the past will arise once again. Some of these are old fears, some learnt from hard lessons. But today, while we should always consider the past and be informed by it, we cannot allow these feelings to dictate our future. Indeed, we must do everything to ensure they do not. Dedicate ourselves to this with a totality, because this is a new time that offers an opportunity to not see these mistakes repeated. In truth, I've already seen some in our industry give themselves over to these tendencies, give themselves over to historical differences. Upon taking this job, I myself faced allegations of being a northerner, of not appreciating or understanding the South, of bringing my prejudices into my new role at this new organisation. And so for today, I thought, in the interest of transparency, I should admit something to you all. For the first time in this city, I'm willing to make something of an admission. These accusations against me are at least half true. I am a northerner. It is not just my place of birth, but my identity, indelible to who I am, a fact of which I am ferociously protective and incredibly proud. I came into this life under a northern sun, and it gives me great contentment to know with absolute certainty that I will one day be lowered into the warm soils there. I'm so deeply proud of this for so many reasons, and I thought I should share some of those with you all. I once sat in a room with David Connolly as president of the NTCA. He gave one of the great speeches in history on Australian agriculture, then backed it up the year after and the year after that. If there are books written about this generation of Australian agricultural history, David and his words will resonate through them. I once sat in a quiet corner of a loud bar in Jakarta with Henry Burke, after a long hot day visiting feedlots and listening to Henry with a firm hand provide guidance and encouragement to his Indonesian feedlot staff. I bore witness to the stories of the northern pastoral industry, the musters of hundreds of thousands of cattle across the Barkly. No choppers, no food trucks, just ringers and saddles with swags sleeping dirty and rising tired, for days and days upon end. I once saw David Warriner talking to a room of international investors, holding their attention in the palm of his hand as he whispered the history of the territory, the tales of the black soil during the rain, the bores dug by hand and hammer, the buffalo swam across the floodplains, the bullocks of the desert country, emerging fat, slick and shiny from rolling red sand dunes. He could mesmerise and enrapture with the true mythology of a mythological place, a history seen and not heard, witnessed and lived. He was a true cattleman and someone I was blessed to share time with. I once witnessed Tracy Hayes stand before a crowd of hundreds at a very respectable dinner, and to everyone's shock, condemn the Prime Minister to his face of cowardice, for his failure of leadership, for his aversion to not settling the live export class action, for the harm he was committing to good people by not doing so. Tracy is a peerless leader in our industry and someone I have the very great honour to call a friend. I once had a moment I will cherish forever, standing shoulder to shoulder in a dogfight with the great Mr. Luke Bowen. Had the joy of seeing him in full flight. Luke was one of the very truly great operators. He had this incredible charm, an indelible kindness and trueness, an honesty that was able to dissolve the foreboding of even his most bitter enemies. He found friendship in the most astonishing of places made allies out of foes and family out of friends. He was the best of us, someone I miss every day. And all of these moments make me love the northern cattle industry, each more than the next, and so many others I haven't named I could add to this list. But you see, this is not my future. It's my past. It guides, but it does not dictate. I work for an organisation whose role it is to serve Australia's cattle producers, all of them. And I see it as a very great honour to do so. While it is true that my past will always be with me, my identity set, the great opportunity I have today is to grow, change, and learn from all of Australia's cattle producers, not just the ones with whom I share a common history. As we move forward with these discussions of the coming months, I hope all of us can be able to take a similar approach, to appreciate our collective past, but look for a brighter future. Bring with us our experiences, but be open to those of others. Today, Australia's beef industry stands as the envy of the world. There can be no doubt we are the greatest beef producing nation anywhere. All others stare in amazement at what we do and seek to learn our secrets. And if we are truthful, part of this greatness comes from our levy structures and the work nameless people do in small offices and have done for many years for our industry, often underappreciated and undervalued, but rarely in vain. Cattle Australia will begin consultation on changes to the levy in due time. As we build the framework to see this work undertaken, all voices will be valued and all offered an opportunity to be heard, in the north and in the south, in the west and yes, even in Tasmania, families and corporates, friends known and those not yet met. Our past will form part of this discussion, but I'm so grateful, so excited and so privileged to be able to say that our future will be what we look. It's the last line of the speech, and it's the one you can't get out. But I'm so grateful, so excited, and so privileged to be able to say that it is to the future that we'll be all asked to look, to build together. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Bill. Thank you for that talk. In terms of, what do you hope for the Australian beef industry, and what do you think needs to change to get there?
Thank you, mate. I mean, and look, there's 1,000 answers to that question. I pray for rain, strong markets, cheap grain prices. There's 1,000 things that I hope for the Australian beef industry every day. Well, in the context of what we're talking about, and I do apologise. I probably should, for some of those not intimately acquainted with the structures of the grass-fed cattle industry, I should have probably done a bit more of a introduction around that. But what we're talking about in terms of the grass-fed levy is about $55 million a year of investment that goes into research, marketing, development. And the NRS is an absolute critical aspect to this, and AHA. So this is animal health and welfare and residue monitoring. What we have at the moment is a system that in real value has probably decreased by about $1.50. The transaction levy is $5. It's probably worth $3.50-ish today since the last time we've changed it. There's a lot of arguments in the industry, and there'll be a lot of discussion around how we need to change that and what we need to do. We're going in with absolutely no assumptions, but there is one critical aspect of it above all that we need to address as a matter of urgency, and that's the National Residue Survey. The National Residue Survey is filled with some of the most boring people I've ever met in my life. There's no one here from the NRS, is there? I once attacked a guy from BOM. Yeah, Sam. I once made jokes about BOM in front of a crowd, and then there was 5 BOM people there. I didn't retract the jokes, to be honest. But what NRS does is it is a key enabler of trade to more than 100 countries around the world. We cannot exist without what the NRS does. And the problem that we have is their role and their function has become more expensive in the last 17 years. Testing and residue monitoring is an expensive activity to undertake. And what we're reaching with them at the moment is where we don't have any reserves left, and where they are now starting to struggle to actually be able to function. So one of the aspects to this levy review that has to be addressed as a matter of urgency isn't necessarily the $5 itself. It's the way the money is split up in between. We need to have a way to be able to adjust it when one agency needs more money than another to be able to continue to function, because no one cares about the NRS, and there are days and weeks and months where I wish I didn't have to. But the role that they undertake on behalf of the beef industry is absolutely critical, and it's the things that you don't think about that you most rely on. And this is one of those things that for the collective cattle industry, no one's really paying attention. No one's going to NRS meetings every week, and no one's going to NRS AGMs, and I would I understand why. But their role is absolutely vital to us. We export to 100 countries around the world. This is a multi-billion dollar trade, and it's all enabled by the National Residue Server. So I guess my hope for this, mate, is we've got to fix that starting point.
Will Ashcoober, New South Wales farmers.
He's also a Queenslander, but that's fine.
No, born in Sydney, moved to Queensland on technicality. But Will and I went to uni together, hence the jibe. But Will, great speech and said all the right things. Yet New South Wales farmers, as a full fee paying member to Cattle Australia, found out about the levy review through a media release, not through consultation. Similarly, found out that you were coming to Sydney today through the Farm Riders invite, not through a direct member service or call to say, heads up, here I am. How genuine is Cattle Australia about what you've outlined as the need for the transaction levy review versus, say, at your inaugural AGM in Albury, we had a presentation on how levies could fund groups like Cattle Australia to undertake advocacy for producers. And similarly, we continue to hear rumours from your counterparts in other peaks about Cattle Australia seeking levies from Meat and Livestock Australia, who are funded by levies, to undertake this levy review. So what is the transparency on the actual state of the beef transaction levy review for our grass-fed beef producers in New South Wales and Australia?
Yeah, great questions, mate. So there's a bit to unpack there. I'll start with the end and I'll work my way back. So Cattle Australia is a very different body to a lot of what our state farming organisations and entities like the National Farmers Federation. We're prescribed in legislation. So we have a role that we need to fulfil governed by federal legislation. It's called the Australian Meat Industry, AMLI Act, Australian Meat Industry Livestock Act. What we are is what's called a prescribed industry body. And one of the things that we are tasked with doing, one of our core functions, is providing producer insight and producer information to what's called our RDCs, which is MLA, around how they're allocating the grass-fed levy. That's one of the things that we have to do. Part of that role is we also have to monitor the health of the levy itself. So in terms of what are we doing at the moment, we're seeing some issues. And so what we've said is that we're going to need to do a review. One of the things that we're doing at the moment is discussing how can we fund this process, because there's easy ways to do this, and certainly there is a view and an opinion that we can hold a series of Microsoft team meetings and the Australian cattle industry can call into that and everything's going to be fine, because if everyone misses the meetings, it's their fault. Certainly the approach that we're looking at doing, and certainly the approach that I'm a big advocate for because I've done these roles for so long, is that we need to go out and regionally consult with people face to face. From my perspective, that is a non-negotiable. Now, these things are expensive and they take time. The last time we did this review 17 years ago, the levy was used. Meat and Livestock Australia actually ran the process themselves. So through one form or another, to conduct the research to be able to understand what needs to happen with the levy, it is most likely levy funds will be used for that. Who administers those funds and how they're spent is still a discussion to be had. We're at a very early stage of this, and this is what will be at least 18 months worth of work. It will be a huge amount of effort. There's going to be a lot of column inches written by some of the people in this room about it, but it will not be something that's done quickly, and it will not be something that's done cheaply. So the challenges for us is determining how it's going to work moving forward. And at this stage, we have a fairly good idea about how that's going to work, but there's still a lot of hoops to get through. Other than that, mate, I need to add you to a mailing list. Clearly, I've made some mistakes and I haven't informed you, but I will definitely be in touch next time I'm coming to Sydney.
So, and to be fair, you've inherited a decision that was made before you took this role. So, but yeah, I mean, that's the thing. The levy is funding. The levy is being paid to you by the recipient of the levy to fund whether they should have their funding increased, decreased, or kept the same.
Yeah.
But
That's
here we
right.
are, conundrum. What beef producers have said, you know what, apart from the NRS issue, we want CA to undertake the levy review.
Yeah. No, and we will be undertaking. That's the position of the government, it's the position of MLA, it's the position of us. So the really easy answer to that is it will be us.
Thanks, Will. Robert Hardy from Farm Riders. Your opponents in advocacy in the animal welfare and other sorts of spaces, frankly, have a lot more money than most of the farming bodies that are out to represent the interests of Australian farmers. As part of your levy review, do you think the time has come, not just for beef, for grass-fed beef, but agriculture more broadly, that advocacy is funded through some form of levy to ensure that farmers' interests are fought back against the rivers of gold that many of the animal advocacy groups have at their disposal?
Yeah. So I'll answer that in two ways. It is really important to understand it, and certainly the last 10 years, I think, certainly in my experience in the North, have had a huge impact from the animal advocacy groups. They've been very, very strong, very targeted, very strategic in what they've done, and they've certainly given us a lot of work over the years. They're quite industry, and they're sort of changing a little bit in the way they operate at the moment. But the big rise at the minute is huge amounts of overseas money coming into ENGOs. And I mean tens of millions of dollars. And like I hesitate to say these things publicly because I'm aware what section of Facebook I sound like I'm reading. But it is the truth. And what we're seeing is very much a global agenda. It's very well coordinated to try and see environmental standards implemented in multiple countries around the world. Australia is a really good target for these things. People ask me, why don't they focus on China? Or why don't they focus on Indonesia, where there's worse environmental outcomes comparatively to Australia? The simple answer with why you target Australia is it has an effective regulatory system. So if you want to see legislative change in animal welfare standards, or you want to see legislative change in environmental standards, you need to target countries that have a really good regulatory enforcement system, because legislative change in many countries around the world, say Zimbabwe hypothetically, doesn't really change the behaviour on the ground. So why Western nations, and certainly Australia in a lot of these instances, has been such a target for these activist groups is because you can manipulate our political system. You can manipulate people in the cities. You can provide your version of the facts, and you can get people to vote in a certain way. So Australia's become a hotspot for these sorts of behaviours, largely because, by and large, everyone is so law-abiding. So if you change the laws, practice change. And so that's one of the reasons. So it's a good point. In terms of whether we should be able to access it, the short answer is, mate, I'm not going to preempt anything. We're going to go out and we're going to sit down with everybody and we're going to say, what do you guys think? What do you want to see this levy spent on? Are you happy with the services that you've been provided with? Do you want to see change? I think that legislative barriers around advocacy are probably too high, but I think there is a lot of work. Cattle Australia, with a very, very small teams, I sit on 52 different advisory committees for the federal government, and I just got added to another one this morning, 53. Advisory committees for the federal government and various different industry consultative structures. And these are technical committees. I'm a reasonably smart guy. A lot of these meetings I have to get a lot of help to be able to perform in, because this is really technical and really precise decision making on behalf of the industry. Is there a conversation about better resourcing for scientific research and for capacity to be able to better participate in these things? I think that's a fair question. And I think within the current legislation that we have, there's the potential for that to happen. But there's a very key difference between advocacy and policy. And I think those are the things that, if there was ever a world where money was going to policy, I could see that to a certain extent. I think advocacy is always going to have to be paid for by the industry, by individuals.
Coleman from LAWD. I attended a Visitor meeting last night, and Simon Krulby, commonly convicted, $13.50 dead for lambs next winter, $4.80 for cows, dress, and $7, live I should say, and $7 hoops to feeder steers. Now, let's say he's right. But doesn't that give some level of justification that, we've got markets that move really quickly, and to have this period of time between review just it's not fit for purpose anymore. And is there an advocacy there that maybe produces sweets up a bit more?
I don't know. And there's different metrics on how to calculate all of this. So one of the things about the way Commonwealth matching dollar works for the RDCs and specifically for the beef industry is it's a percentage of GVP value. So we have a maximum percentage of GVP value that says if you have a dollar and you can match that with a government dollar up to the percentage of GBP value. Now, how we do that, because our R component of our levies, which is about 99 cents, doesn't hit that cap, we have a thing called the MLA donor company. So what the MLA donor company allows, outside of the money that industry itself invests in R&D, it allows private companies to come to MLA and say, I have a research project into genetics, nutrition, whatever it may be. Is it eligible under your criteria to be matched? Now, traditionally it was a 50-50 match, which is pretty attractive for commercial guys, especially people trying to commercialize a new product. You would go to MLA and say, here's $15 million of my money. I want $15 million of your money, and I'm going to implement this into the industry. That, even with the MDC operating at pretty full capacity, last year we gave back $19 million. Now, that's a paper value. We didn't physically hand a check over to the treasurer, but what we didn't do was achieve the maximum potential of our R&D spend, because we were unable to secure enough commercial partners and we were unable to generate enough R&D income ourselves to be able to hit that cap. So in terms of do we need to increase the $5 or not, there's a lot of conversations around just capturing that value within the existing $5. So what may be an option, and again, this is, I'm going to get yelled at for this, we just don't know. But what we're going to go talk to industry and say, look, here's all of the information that we have. This is what the realities of what we're investing in today are. Here's some of the money that we're not spending. Maybe this is something that we need to think about. But we're not predetermining an outcome here. What we're focused on is it's been 17 years since we've done this. We have some critical services that are struggling. We need to have a conversation about what we're doing. That's the focus of where we are now.
Well, I'll go again. So I think for the interest of the room, and one thing, you're not the only commodity that's considering the funding to the National Residue Survey, which is administered by government. So why is it the responsibility of producers to pay more to the NRS, in your view, when agriculture as a pillar of the Australian economy and the GDP that it raises, et cetera, yep, is a key contribution that these producers make every day to Australia's benefit?
Yeah, terrific question. Is anyone from the Australian government here? Anyone as a political representative? No, I'm good. Okay, we're fine. I've got the reason I checked that is I've got a bit of a patchy record with these things. At the NTCA conference this year, I knew I was stepping down. I was anticipating going into a life of playing golf, not because I have so much money, but I thought I could live at the golf course. And I wasn't anticipating that I would be doing this job in particular, but another industry role such as this. And I made a rousing speech about the evils of the Labor Party and the reason why we needed to band together as an industry to see them kicked out, because I thought at the time that was wise to do. Weeks before the largest election loss the LNP's had in anyone's living memory. So I'm very, very cautious about how I approach these things. There's a lot of really, really good points in that, Ash. There's a good argument to say government should invest in these things, but it's just not the reality of how the legislation's structured. It's not the reality of how it's ever been structured. The industry's always paid for these services. And there's a lot more to unpack in here. So one of the things that's looming over the entire cattle industry at the moment, it's looming over the grains industry, it's looming over pretty well anybody who exports in this country, is cost recovery. The Department of Agriculture for many, many years has been undertaking review after the cost of their own services and the portion of their services that Treasury says they need to recover from the industry. The problem being that their services are incredibly expensive to administer, they're incredibly expensive to provide, and every time there's a change in IR laws or an enterprise bargaining agreement for the federal departments, the costs go up. So the problem that the department has is their costs aren't fixed and they're sliding. So looming over the industry at the moment is a decision that needs to be made about whether or not full cost recovery is going to be applied to agriculture. It's a huge, huge cost for our exporters, like our meat exporters. This is dollars and dollars and dollars a kilo. Like, this is serious money. For our live exporters, it's probably it would put their industry under an enormous amount of pressure, even in the northern cattle trade in the north. So there's a lot of conversation to be had about why the government doesn't pay for these services. The reality of where the legislation is today is that they don't, and they're not going to, and we need these things in order for us to make our money. So the fastest way to solve this problem and the most reasonable way to solve this problem is to figure out how we make an adjustment so that NRS is fully funded. We're finding ways to do that now under the existing structure, but where we sit today, we have a set playing field. Cattle Australia has a specific role for that playing field, and we've pulled the trigger saying we want to fix it with the tools that we have at our disposal. So we're reviewing the levy.